You're tuned into the hottest paranormal life show on YouTube, Into the Fringe, where we discuss lost civilizations, UFOs, cryptids, unsolved mysteries, megalithic structures, extraterrestrials, interdimensional portals, time skips, and more. Don't change that channel, because now you are leaving the mainstream and entering into the fringe.
Greetings, followers. It is I, Cardinal Sin, and welcome to Into the Fringe number 36 with Albert Rosales.
Hi, guys.
Born in Cuba, Albert S. Rosales migrated to the United States in 1966. He had several unusual incidents as a young man while living in Cuba, and such incidents continued as an adult in the United States. Rosales became interested in unusual phenomena and UFOs at a young age, but soon directed his focus to the crux of the phenomena, the humanoids, entities, extraterrestrials, UFOnauts, etc. He began collecting data on such encounters from worldwide sources in the late 80s. He has a current database of over 20,000 entries, which is updated and corrected daily, and has published 16 books to date. Welcome, Albert Rosales, to Into the Fringe.
Hey, Gil, I'm glad to be back. We're ready to go. I'm really excited to talk about the cases we have today. We're going to be covering the years 1930 through 1949, which is this volume here of my book.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And I am excited as well. Let's see who we have here. Mr. MH is here. Hail Cardinal Sin and Albert. Looking forward to a great show as always. Don McDouglas is here. Anti-Derivative Jill is here. The Stream Elements bot is here, but not the Stream Elements tip jar. So if you would like to tip me for any reason, if you enjoy the content, would like to buy me a coffee or a pizza, you may do so at the PayPal link on the screen. It's 100% secure. I don't see your credit card numbers or anything like that. So feel free to tip if you would like. And we also have brand new a Teespring store where you can get your Into the Fringe t-shirts at the URL on your screen. And we also have Carol's Cookies, Hail to the Edge of Time, and Ivan Ivanovich is here. So we have a good amount of people, and we will go ahead and put that brand new Teespring store URL up there on the screen for just a minute so people can copy it down, and we will go ahead and move on to our cases for this evening. All right, so Albert, do you want to start or shall I?
I'll start. Let's do I'll do one, you do the next. How about that?
Sounds like a winner.
Yeah, and then we have, leftover time. We'll pick any cases from the book. We'll take it from there. All righty.
Sounds good.
This is, like I said, it's going to be covering the time period from 1930 through 1949. 1930, of course, right? That's before the what we call the modern
UFO age.
Starting in 1947. That's 1930 pre-Arnold cases. A lot of people not aware that there were a lot of incidents back then. But let's start with a strange case here which is either paranormal or UFO related entity. This is from Alberta, Canada, a place called Spondon. This goes back all the way to 1930. One afternoon, the witness, who was only about 6 years old at the time, Harold Howery, remembers he was playing in a gully near a lake, but it was dry. He will go down there and play one day. And one afternoon when he was playing there, he heard someone call his name. He turned around to the sound and he saw standing at the edge of the gully by the lake, by the dried out lake, a radiant, what do you call a radiant white being, a humanoid, human in form, which that's what a humanoid is. And this entity, the weird part of it, real weird part is it had enormous wings on its back. We could call it a Mothman, but it's not really, because this is a radiant white being, so it's not your typical Mothman. But it was winged. So he couldn't remember a face, but he remembers that he was calling his name. The being, he assumed he was an angel. Of course, he didn't have no point of reference, so you're going to call that type of being an angel with wings and all that. And he called Harold's name once more, then disappeared, leaving behind a stunned and a newly devout Harold. I mean, he interpreted this incident as encountering an angel. Years later, he in 1968, years later, him and his wife encountered a real UFO in British Columbia, Ravelstock. But I guess he had numerous encounters throughout his life. This incident is from a writer named Brennan Storr. He wrote a little book called Strange Little Place, The Hauntings and Unexplained Events of One Small Town. Interesting. Well, what do we make of that? I don't know.
I'm not sure, but the fact that later he saw a UFO, a lot of people that encounter the UFO knots are told, one, you're special, and two, we will be back.
We'll be back. I come to realize that most people that encounter UFOs and related are repeaters.
Yep.
They have incidents back in their childhood that they don't remember, or removed from
which
but
Project Blue Book didn't include in their files, because if somebody saw a UFO more than once, they figured they were a crackpot.
They dismissed them out of hand. They also, at the beginning, they dismissed all the reports that included humanoid encounters. They were dismissed.
Yeah. And then later, the same thing would happen to abductions. So the next case is in Texas. The exact location is not given. This is from 1930 at 10 a.m. A young woman was driving in the family car in an isolated hilly area when she remembers turning a curve on the road and running up to and under the side of a huge thing sitting by the road. She was within a few steps of it, almost under one side of it, when she stopped. It was sort of shiny gunmetal color, round and shaped like two dinner plates face to face, with a dome in the upper top side. It was about 100 feet across, about 15 feet thick. There was a small, slender door, and the door chute let down to the ground with steps on the inside of it. The backside of the ship sat on the ground, but the downhill side was braced up with two slender legs with round plates in the ground as feet. There was one man of normal size, about 5 feet 10 inches to 6 feet tall, and about 165 to 180 pounds. This person came walking in the road to meet the witness and forced her to stop while he talked to her. Or at least she thinks he talked, although she did not see his lips move, and he turned his face away and looked down. While she seemed to hear him speaking, several other persons came walking up behind him. She took the 8 to 10 of these persons to be a troop of Boy Scouts about 8 to 10 years old, average size. However, when near her, she saw that there was a big difference. They looked a bit like Japanese or Chinese. They had very large slanted eyes, very large cheekbones, and very thin lips. And they did not look like children, but adults. They smiled at her, but did not speak. She had to smile back because they were sort of pushing each other around like in horseplay, like each one was trying to get in front to see better and acting like kids will. The clothing they wore at first she took to be scout uniforms, tan in color, but when they came up close to her, she saw that there were no pockets, buttons, edges, wrinkles, or pocket flaps. Very clean, very neat, and nice. They wore tight little caps, cut like baseball caps with narrow bills. The larger man was dressed the same way. Offhand, the whole bunch seemed like a scoutmaster and a troop of scouts. She had a small argument with the man. He said, "Lady, you'll have to leave the highway and go around as we have the road blocked here." She said, "What is that?" pointing to the saucer. He ignored this question and said, "Never mind, you'll just have to go around. We want the road left clear and open and can't let you through here. You are a wonderful driver and you can make it all right." The man was directing her to drive off the road and down into a rocky gully and then up another hillside to rejoin the road some distance away. She still argued and said, "I can't put this big car down through that creek and rocks. It'd tear my car all to pieces, and I could never get out the upper side, and besides, you don't own this highway." But somehow, she couldn't help herself, and dazedly drove very slowly and fearfully down into this creek and rough canyon. She realized that the man was walking right along the side of her car at her elbow. She felt very safe and was able to make the crossing and was no longer afraid. This was about 9:30 to 10 o'clock a.m. and is the last thing she remembers until she came to herself walking in on her home porch about 12 o'clock that night, about 15 miles distant. Where she was, where she went, what happened to her those many hours, she has no idea. Neighbors had driven along that area during the day and later told her family that they saw her car parked on the hill beyond the canyon. Her dad was starting a search party when she came in. And this is from Michael Swords. It's type C or G. And according to the source, the witness had asked for help from the Condon Committee, but they ignored her. No hypnotic regression was ever performed.
This is an amazing case. I mean, it has a lot of elements there, like missing time, possible abduction, and the weird part is the humanoids. One was a human-like person, like me and you, and the other ones were shorter, like she said, Japanese, slanted eyes. And the weird part is that she said they were acting like kids, trying to get up a, look at her. And they were wearing uniforms, caps. Very, very strange. And I feel that the guy somehow was able to direct her to the path up the hill to keep her safe. Okay, then we got let's move on to the next case. See that image there of the humanoid that was seen, another humanoid with wings, a flying humanoid. This is back also in 1930. We're going back to Moscow in Russia.
Okay.
1930. It was a late evening. The witness, Ida Semyonovna Sidorenko. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but she was sleeping in her bedroom in house number 23 on called the Yaskaya Street on the second floor when she suddenly awoke and felt that someone was standing near her looking at her. This happens many times when we have what I call a bedroom visitation. She opened her eyes and saw a small man, what you call a man, only about a meter in height. The short humanoid was completely black in color and had what appeared to be small wings, like in the image, around the neck area. Small wings around the neck area. The intruder had what appeared to be a tray. I'm not sure what that means. Maybe he had something hanging from the neck. Seconds later, the alien visitor flew upwards and out the open window. I guess he was inside the apartment and he flew out the window and he emitted a low humming sound as he did. She said, resembling that of flapping bird wings at high speed. The witness remained terrified long after the humanoid had left, a type of fear that she had never experienced before. Of course, this incident was reported years later by the witness to researcher Michael Gerstein, one of the prominent researchers there in Russia now, from St. Petersburg, Russia. Now, a flying humanoid going into the apartment to check on you. That is weird. And
I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so that we can take a look at this image, which is next up here. And this comes from Maya West, Puerto Rico, 1934, during the morning.
This is a real weird case.
A young man, Juan Rivera Felberti, was flying a kite in a field outside of town when suddenly he felt something pulling on the kite. Looking up, he could now see a silvery sphere about 20 feet in diameter hovering over him. A beam of light was directed at the witness from the sphere. He then floated up and entered the sphere through an opening in its top. Inside, he saw a man wearing dark green tight-fitting outfit sitting in at a control panel which had a large crystal. It was shiny, resembling an emerald. Next to him stood a blonde girl with rosy skin and wearing a silvery outfit. She looked very young. She was holding the witness's kite. He was then taken into another room by the girl and shown a box that emitted certain images. He attempted to get his kite back but was unable to. The little girl then showed the witness a little box full of colored buttons and asked him if he wanted to play with it. The girl then pressed some buttons on the box and suddenly a cloud of spiraling smoke came out. The smoke took the form of a monkey-like creature. Soon, several monkeys had come out of the box. The girl then asked Juan if he wanted to take the kite for the box, and he agreed. To trade the kite for the box, and he agreed. He was finally deposited at the same spot from which he was picked up. He twisted an ankle in the process. According to Juan, he kept the strange box for a long time and even entertained his little friends with the monkey trick. Oddly enough, however, grown-ups could not see the monkeys, only the children. In the end, the monkeys caused him great problems because he could not control them, and later he ended up burying the machine box on a nearby mountain. However, he feels that some of the monkey-like creatures had escaped and are probably still roaming the Puerto Rican bush. In later life, according to Juan Rivera, he had other strange experiences, including encounters with alien women who enticed him to making love with them. He also claims to have received a telepathic message during one of his encounters. The hour of the new harvest is approaching, unsure as to what the meaning is. And this source came from Sebastian Robio Lamarche, Manifesto OVNI in Puerto Rico, Santo Domingo, Cuba, also Chris Abeck, Return to Magonia. Now, some things I'd like to point out, Albert, about this case is I personally knew someone who was a friend who claimed to be an abductee all of his life. I was actually in a band with this person, and he said when he was living in Russell, Kansas, which is all the way on the other side of the state from where I live in Lawrence in northeastern Kansas, that he was at home on the front porch, and up the hill came these small gray monkeys. And as they got closer, he realized that they were not monkeys at all. So I wonder if there is a correlation between these cases.
I don't know, but the witness here seems to think that these creatures might be still roaming around in Puerto Rico, and then you hear the incidences with the chupacabra, and later on mid-70s, 1995, and Puerto Rico is full of a lot of strange events, an incredible amount of events that just defy logic, like this one here.
Before we get to that, Mr. MH has a couple of comments. Possible hybrid, the girl. The smoke could be a rift between dimensions, which allows creatures to cross dimensions, such as like cases at Skinwalker Ranch. And the box perhaps opens a rift between dimensions. Also, those monkeys could be biological androids too, like the Greys, just a different model.
Possibly. I mean, the interdimensional part, I'm convinced that happens a lot with encounters. That there's a rift between our dimension and their dimension, and they cross over, or we cross over. I know many incidents like that. Let's move on with that image right there. A very weird creature that was encountered in year 1938. I first heard about this case from Jacques Vallée, Passport to Magonia, one of his cases there, and it really intrigued me. It took me years to obtain an image of the creature, but there it is, kind of weird. 1938, unknown time, at a location called Uminda in Estonia. Back then, it was part of the Soviet Union, Estonia. And the narrative goes: two Estonians, they don't give any names, they say they saw a frogman, and one of them chased him some 100 feet when he disappeared. They described the frogman they saw about 3.5 feet high, legs slightly more than half his height. He had long legs. The head was hemispherical, directly on the body without a neck. Body with a hump on chest, mouth a straight slit standing over a great part of the head. Eyes were also slit-like. The skin said it looks like a brown-green pegamoid material. Not sure what pegamoid. I think it has to do with like, what do you call that? What the kids play when they were soft material, some kind of plastiline or something like that. Except for the hands, which were human colored. The being walked very strangely. The legs were moving in a careful lifting fashion, yet very elegant. As thought gravity were too small. When chased, the being accelerated enormously, so to speak, propelled by a terrible flutter of his feet. He was thought to have vanished behind some lattice work beside the path. I guess I never found this entity again, but kind of strange looking. This is from it's a listing in the Humcat Humanoid catalog. by Russian researcher Sven Chalin. I guess they call it a frogman because to them it looked like a big frog. I mean, the picture shows exactly what they describe: a big hump on the chest, slit mouth, eyes, long
And
legs.
again, Mr. MH in the chat says it sounds similar to the Loveland frogman cryptid alien.
Correct. Yeah, true. Same type of body. I think they had like a hump on the chest area.
So this case comes from 1938, time unknown. The late Captain V. de Alvering, formerly one of the curators of Calcutta's Victoria Memorial in Chaoyangtze while working out in the higher elevations of Tibet, momentarily lost his vision during a whiteout snowstorm that blew in over the Himalayas quite suddenly. Freezing, suffering from the raw elements, and disoriented, de Alvarenga could have died of hypothermia in such a blinding blizzard in a few minutes' time. He claimed the 9-foot-tall, whitish gray hair-covered figure actually sheltered, fed, and cared for him through the worst of it. When the captain recovered sufficiently to have a sense of his surroundings and reason his situation, the creature had disappeared. Captain de Alvaren's description of a benign, curiously protective creature contradicts other reports. And this is a type E encounter, and I will put the source of that into the chat so that people can take a look.
Hopefully the link's still active, but this is the case in which a what do you call it, Sasquatch type creature was helpful, wasn't aggressive. Like there are many reports of in the Himalayas there in the area, Hindu Kush. And
Yeah, that's a dead link.
it is that
But
thing.
it does sound like a yeti.
Yeah, Yeti type creature that mostly are when they're reported to be aggressive in nature. And this person was, allegedly his life was saved by one of these creatures. Right. We're gonna move on to the only location here is central Siberia in Russia. That could be anywhere in Siberia, but I guess the central area. And this has to do with a geologist, Mr. A. Panov. He was sent to a remote area of central Siberia in a temporary government assignment. This is back in the 30s, there, Stalin time. He was there to perform technical adjustment on a radio transmitter recently installed there. The hut with the radio transmitter was positioned on a lonely hill at an altitude of 2,000 meters, pretty high up there. One day, as he went on a walk to a small mountainous lake nearby, he reached an area where he could see the lake in its entirely. entirely. When he looked, he was surprised to see a lentil-shaped metallic construction, I guess by the lake, that at first he thought was a house or laboratory. According to him, it appeared to be about 10 meters in diameter, 2.5 to 3 meters in height, and it appeared to be raised over the ground on several short metallic props or legs, which were not clearly seen. He then noticed 3 human figures, human-like, standing near the object. According to Panov, they wore silver-colored coveralls. Panov then decided to go sit on a nearby rock and continue watching the strange group scene. He decided that he must have been some kind of secret experiment, and he did not want to be discovered. He watched the 3 men in silvery suits take out a large globe from the building or the object, place it in some type of platform, and go back inside the structure. Next, the unexpected occurred. The globe began ascending, floating slowly up and much lower than meteorological balloon. Panov decided he was watching the work of meteorologists. Unfortunately, Panov had to return to his hut, but decided to return again, this time armed with a pair of binoculars. He went back to his hut and came back. But sudden technical problems with the radio equipment forced him to cancel his plans. That night, he stepped out of his hut and noticed a faint column of pink light coming from the direction of the lake. About, it was 1 a.m., the light had vanished. The next day, he made his second excursion to the lake. To his amazement, he noticed two such silvery objects orbiting now. There was no landing strip that he could see anywhere, and he was totally perplexed as to how that second structure had appeared. He then thought that the objects were some kind of underwater exploring machines, and this time he could not see any men around them. But soon the binoculars became useless as an extensive fog enveloped the lake. However, he was able to see several darkish openings on the objects which he thought were windows. Then a red blinking light appeared on top of both of the objects. He left soon, but when he visited the spot for a third time, the objects and the fog were gone. He couldn't find any traces. Later, as he examined the area near the lake where the objects had been, he experienced an unexplained severe onset of headaches, which he attributed to carbonic acids in the air. I don't know why. I guess he's a geologist. But obviously, this guy encountered some type of anomalous objects that were not terrestrial. They're in the middle of Siberia. And this from the researcher Valentin Balashnikov, PhD, and from the NLO magazine in St. Petersburg, Russia. The initials NLO means UFO in Russian.
Ah, I see. And this is an image from the next case.
Strange case.
So I will read that one. We have a couple more comments here. Super Blubberpuss is here. Hail, Super Blubberpuss. Mr. M.H. asks, is it the Lake Baikal?
It does not give the name of the lake.
I think we don't know.
Yeah.
That lake is the deepest lake in the world, and there's a case of underwater humanoids sighted there.
Yeah, he's correct. Yeah.
Interesting. All right, so this location is Saarijärvi, Kula, Finland. I apologize to any Finnish people in the audience for murdering the name of that town.
Yeah.
And this is from November 29th, 1939 at 1700 hours. The day before the Great Winter War began, 14-year-old Arvo was in the forest with his father collecting firewood. When it was getting to be twilight, they headed home. Almost at once, the boy noticed on the right side of the path, on a small rocky hill some 2 to 3 meters high, a strange device 3 to 4 meters in diameter. He assumed it was a moonshine factory, and since he had never seen one before, he wanted to have a look. His father, however, deterred him from approaching the object. He observed the device from a distance of about 70 meters. He described the device as being 3 to 4 meters in diameter, narrowing at the top, which was hidden by the dense furs. The bottom section was round, like a kettle, about 2.5 meters in height, supported by perhaps 3 landing legs made of 2 to 3 rods ending in triangular plates, which he would observe later. From the bottom of the craft emanated a dull flame like that of an upside-down candle 1.5 meters long. From the sides of the lower section of the object shot out 5 to 6 strong flames of different colors, angled at 45 degrees down and about 1 meter in length, emitting a loud noise resembling that of escaping gas. Standing Outside the object was a 160 centimeter tall human-like creature, which was clad in an astronaut-like suit with a round helmet, which had an oval opening. It was carrying a box, which he was apparently using to direct 2 or 3 robot-like creatures, which had box-like heads. That reminds me of a Halloween costume that I once wore. At least 2 of these robots lifted his legs very high while walking, so Arvo could see that the legs were like 2 rods below the knees, ending in a plate. It was not possible to make a very accurate or detailed description of their activities due to the twilight and covering trees. The next day, the Winter War began, but Arvo went to the landing site despite his father's objections, which also refused to go fetch firewood with him. At the site where the object was seen, there was a triangular mark of a support leg. There was also a strong, unpleasant smell in the area. And this source is from Heikki Virtanen, Finland.
He sent several cases directly to me. Interesting cases is right before the start of the Winter War. I guess the World War II already started in Central Europe, but this is when Russia invaded Finland back the first time. I don't know, but that's what they call it, the Winter War.
I have to tell you, Albert, when I stumbled across your humanoid database online, I was so fascinated. I read for hours and hours at one sitting, and then the next day I read for hours and hours, and so on until I was so full of cases and creatures and humanoids that I probably dreamed about some of those cases. But I understand that your online database will be returning at some point, correct?
I'm hoping to have that back online next year with far more cases now, like thousands more than I used to have before, if you can believe that. Many of them are dated, corrected, so on and so on. But yeah, I remember a lot of people had told me the same thing you said, that they will sit down and read, and they couldn't stop reading all the cases. It's just so fascinating.
And I wanted to remind people to make sure to stay to the end of the stream to enter the giveaway for a chance to win Albert's book, Humanoid Encounters, The Others Among Us, from 1930. And I will make you big so that we can see that a little bit better. From 1930 to 1949, is that right?
Yeah, 1949.
Okay.
436 pages.
It's a big book.
Yeah.
And Mr. M.H. says, those astronaut-like alien cases are interesting, like the image of the Soloway Firth spaceman and others I've read about and seen.
They are.
And
they're definitely different from the Greys.
Don McDouglas says, I used to print them at my work and read them while taking the bus after work, about your online database.
Oh, wow.
And Mr. MH says, it is indeed awesome to read.
Thank you.
All right. What's the next case?
Oh, the next case is kind of weird, interesting. This is, we're going back to 1941. This is still before the modern era. From Malibu Beach in California, 1941 evening. And this weird encounter involved a movie star, Shelley Winters. I don't know if you know Shelley
Oh,
Winters.
sure. Yeah.
This is what she revealed. Years later,
She must be friends with Shirley MacLaine.
Yeah. Well, years later, she revealed how she had made love with an alien from outer space, according to her.
Wow.
The Oscar winner said that a red-colored creature emerged from the ocean. This creature came out of the ocean and he put his webbed hands around her as she lay on the beach bed. Shelley recalled, I said hello there. I wanted to be friendly. I was a very sexy woman then. This is what she said.
That's true. She was.
And then, she looked into the eyes, and she's not sure what physically happened next, but she felt all tingly. It was a very special feeling. Shelley, at the time of this interview, she was 68. She told U.S. television viewers that her encounter followed a wartime party in Malibu. The entity emerged like a frogman, and she thought the Japanese might be invading. But he was way too tall to be Japanese. She kept quiet about the incident in case she was laughed out of work. The alien wrote her a cryptic message in the sand, then wandered back into the ocean. According to her, she had had no contact with him for 50 years. She mused. What can I tell you? It's not the first time that somebody has alleged sexual intercourse with aliens or with humanoids. The interesting part here is that this alien, or whatever he was, came out of the ocean. Maybe it was
with webbed hands.
Yeah, and this is from Shelley Winters. I don't know why she will make something up like this, but
she stood nothing to gain by making something like that up.
Only ridicule. That's about it.
Yeah.
And this is from a couple sources, but there it is.
So this next case is from New York, date 1941, time unknown. According to Miss Mildred E. Danforth, during the phase 2 of the construction work on the Cathedral of St. John the Divine, workmen left a high scaffolding in place over a weekend. When they returned, they found lying on the scaffolding the body of a little man with one eye in the middle of his forehead. A New York Times reporter is said to have written it up, but his story was killed to avoid the charge of sensationalism. Army authorities were said to have removed the body. No other information. And the source is Morris K. Jessup from The Expanding Case for the UFO, Type H. Do you think this link is still good?
No, that's from his book. It's from his physical book, The Expanding Case for the UFO, page 210. A lot of the cases are not from they're from books or magazines, but it's funny because this is the only location where I was able to find this reference to this case. Little known case. Not too many people know about it. Like they said, there was no information after the encounter. The army moved in. The story was killed. And Morris K. Jessup, he was a famous ufologist that he committed suicide here in Miami-Dade County. In Park, I used to visit a lot. Anyway.
Good luck pronouncing this one.
Interesting because the little man had a one eye in the middle of his forehead, so he was a cyclopean.
Yeah.
Alien or humanoid. Type H is when an entity or a crash is recovered, or a dead alien.
Interesting that the army removed it.
Yeah. Not too many people have heard of that story.
So are you ready to tackle this next one?
Yeah, go ahead. It's your turn now.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought I already read the one before that. So the location is Aetolica Arena, Greece, from 1942, 1700 hours. Mrs. Samis, 10 at the time, was shepherding sheep at the Diamato location. Suddenly she heard a noise like from a metallic motor that was passing by. Then she saw a UFO that was going to land. It was shaped like two pie plates stuck together on the rims and had two protuberances like antennae. It was silvery and 2 to 3 meters wide. It lowered on a 150-meter high hill nearby with many trees, so she could not see the exact place of the landing. She started to walk toward the location, not knowing exactly why. She saw a small man, 1 meter tall. He was wearing something like an overall, and on its head was something like a biker's crash helmet. He began walking around in circles in the area. The witness was terrified and started running away. So did the sheep. After an hour, she returned to the site, but her dog started barking and then ran away. And the source is Thanasis Vembos from Strange Magazine number 12, and this is a Type C encounter.
Yeah, this Thanasis Vembos is a Greek researcher that I correspond with, a friend of mine. He has collected many incidents from Greece, and this is right in the middle of World War II. This encounter. I don't know if the Germans had invaded Greece then already, but it was 1942, right in the middle of it.
And Mr. MH in the chat says Type X are cool, and Don McDouglas says my favorites are Type E. So, Albert, you really have some fans in the chat here.
I'm telling you. Type X are like incidents that they're so weird that I can't really fit them into the category, so I made them X. Type E is when usually there's the bedroom encounter. You're visited when sleeping in your bedroom, or when somebody in the woods encounters a humanoid, but no UFO. Here we go to the next one. It's another incident involving an object and humanoid. This is in the middle of the war already in France.
Mm-hmm.
Location is Proby, province of Nord in France. 1942. It was late at night. It was like 1 a.m. A woman peddler, I guess she was a peddler in the air, went into her garden. We're near the bomb shelter. She suddenly came nose to nose with 3 dwarfs. She called them dwarfs. In the moonlight, she was able to see clearly. They were not children. Their heads were too large and round, and they all wore short beards. Round heads and beards. And most notable were their eyes, large, and they had a luminous yellow color. So they were glowing yellow, the eyes. They were dressed in type one-piece suits of a shiny metallic sheen. These suits extended over their heads, like that of like fitting cowl on the head, hoodie, leaving only the face exposed. I guess they stood there motionless, each one slightly separated from the other, arms slightly bent and rigid. Frightened, and the woman turned and hurried back into her home, calling her husband. By the time he got outside, there was nothing to be seen. No, I guess no object was seen. This is your typical Type E incident, like our friend was talking about earlier. She was talking when she came among 3 dwarfs, obviously 3 humanoids, large heads, and the strange part here, the eyes were not black, like it's normally reported nowadays. They were like shiny yellow in color. This from French researcher Joel Mesnard and Jean-Marie Vigorne.
There's an image here
of the next case. Okay.
Of the next case. Okay. So I will read that one.
Obviously a reptilian type. Okay.
Yeah, it looks like maybe a reptilian gray. So this location is the Minsk region of Belarus in the USSR. The date 1943, time evening. During the Great Patriotic War, World War II, a soldier was returning to his platoon using an isolated forest path. Suddenly, he saw what appeared to be a man-like figure lying on the ground a few feet in front of him. Thinking it was an injured comrade, he rushed to assist him. Suddenly, as he ran, he realized that it was not a human, but what appeared to be a short reptilian humanoid covered with what appeared to be fish scales. It had membranes between its fingers and toes. Its face, though, with human characteristics, was ugly. Using hand signals, the apparent sick or injured creature had the soldier carry him to the edge of a nearby small lake. Once there, the creature dropped to the ground and dragged itself into the lake. The creature floated in the water and apparently recovered and swam away. The soldier stood stunned, watching the creature disappear under the waters, waving at it. He never told his fellow soldiers about the incident. And the source is from Anomalia Kulichiku.ru, quoting the Megalopolis continent. And this is a type E.
Yeah, type E, reptilian being. Apparently, this is an aquatic creature. Somehow it was caught outside of his, his habitat.
This is the second one we've had in just a few minutes.
Yeah, in the 40s, yeah. All right, let's move on, see what's next. Okay, this is also in the middle of the war, World War II, 1944. A place near a place called I want to kill the name also. I'm sorry for any Dutch friends out there. We're in Germeer, the Netherlands. It was late afternoon. Around the time the Germans, the Nazis, they planned to blow up the seawall because there's a coastal area there. Around that same time, numerous flying objects were seen landing near a local farm by a family and several farm workers. They saw 50 to 100 one-man planes land side by side. I guess they call them planes. The objects were silvery in color and made no noise. Out of each of the object, a single person came out. The pilots were men-like and wore blue overalls, a kind of a hood or cowl over their heads. They were tall and normal in appearance. The beings gestured to the witnesses, apparently in an apparent attempt to tell them not to move closer, stay away. After the beings had looked around and at the sky, they re-entered their objects, which took off and disappeared out of sight. Wow, that's a lot of objects, 50 to 100 of them. But this is an encounter with tall men-like creatures wearing blue overalls. This is from Theo Pachman. He's a Dutch researcher from the newsletter Cosmic Network. Interesting case. That's a lot of humanoids at one time.
Yeah. So this next case is a location near Sundsvall, Sweden. Date late March 1944, time 6 a.m. The witness would get up early each day to go skiing from Svundal to Kliesberget Mountain. This morning was no exception. He traveled the 4-kilometer-long track that ascended Kliesberget. Then he went back down, and after a few kilometers of downhill skiing, when at a place called Talberget, he saw a strange craft which had not been seen before during the ascent. It stood on the ground, a large object about 7 to 8 meters in diameter, standing on 4 support-like legs, and it was less than 20 meters from the witness. The craft looked transparent, but still he could not see through it. The witness became mesmerized at the sight of the object and was drawn irresistibly towards it. He took off his skis and was suddenly sucked up in a sort of elevator. Once inside the spherical object, he saw 3 figures about 120 to 130 centimeters in height, which resembled people. They were dressed in puffy yellow beige suits of a material that he had never before seen, and in the area where the face should have been, there was a smoky glass cover on top of several small horn-like protrusions. He could not distinguish any facial or additional features. The walls were full of instruments with graphs and buttons with characters he had never seen before. He had seen several dashboards in both aircraft, cars, and warships, but these were completely different. He was about to ask, "Where do you come from?" but he did not even have the time to open his mouth when he heard a reply sent directly into his mind. He then asked, "What is going to happen now?" The answer came immediately. "Do not be afraid, we will just be taking some samples." Completely unwillingly, the witness was undressed and placed on a bench-like object. Hose and lots of wires were then connected to his body. Saliva samples were then taken. Then came the worst part. A metallic object was tucked under his groin, which hurt terribly. Something was pumping and pulsating in the abdomen and left leg area. He made an effort to get up, but his muscles did not respond. He felt powerless and terrified, and he eventually lost consciousness. When he came to, he was dressed and able to move again. He was outside the craft, lying on the ground. Wanting to leave the area immediately, he grabbed his skis and turned around to see the object begin to vibrate. The legs were pulled back inside, and silently it shot up, and in seconds it was out of sight. He soon realized that his shoes had been placed on the wrong feet. He stood there, confused, changing his shoes. The pain in his groin began to subside, but his feet felt strange. His skis were completely iced, so he had to scrape the ice off. He struggled on the way back home and finally arrived at 8 a.m. And the source is from Sten Johnson, Tellus, April 1985, citing Hemet's Journal Number 4, 1985. And this was a Type G encounter.
So this is a from Swedish researchers, and those sources are magazines. In Sweden, there's a lot of information. They have many different UFO-related magazines. And this is one of the stories I could find. A lot of these stories I translate automatically with Google Translate. So sometimes there's little mistakes here and there. But anyway, this is what we can call an early abduction report. And they took samples of the person, which he's not identified, but he went through some painful procedures, which we had that nowadays happening. And this is 1944, early abduction report, definitely. The next one, there's an image there, not too clear. Next case. This next case deals with another flying humanoid in Russia again. A place called, there's in the original written drawn by one of the witnesses. A place called Leninsky District in Kazan in the Tatarstan Republic in Russia. That's an autonomous area there in Russia. It happened between March and April 1944, about 7 a.m. in the morning. And the witness left for work at the Kubyshev film factory and was walking along a road by a fence. And as he turned the corner on the road, he saw in the sky right above the building What he described was a figure of a man-like figure, in a white robe, either walking in midair or floating. The person in a robe of white clothing. His legs were almost completely hidden by the robe. There were other witnesses who also gathered around and watched the floating figure for almost 20 minutes. The figure eventually disappeared. This report comes from the archive of the Commission of Anomalous Phenomena of the Supreme Council, the USSR. They had their own investigators out there investigating cases like this. In Russia, they're more open. The government they have a lot of resources investigating incidents like this type. And this case reminds me of something that happened to me in Cuba. Very similar, actually. He was 65 in a place called Santa Clara, Cuba. Recently, my uncle, one of my closest uncle I had, my favorite uncle, had been killed in a car accident. His truck rolled down the hill, and everybody was in mourning. And it was a bad period of time. So I was walking back to my grandmother's house to an alley. I just happened to look up, and right above me there, what I thought was the clouds there was somebody standing there. And it looked to be somebody in a white robe. Then here, looking down, I couldn't see any facial features, but I knew it was a man. He was wearing something white, like a robe, flowing robe, windy. And to me, he was like signaling at me, or and I signaled back, and I just investigated for a while. And then I just kept walking. I left. I never told too many people about this, but I always assumed that it must have been my uncle visiting me. I never heard of UFOs or humanoids at that time. Interesting.
Yeah.
All right. You take the next one.
Okay. Is this one from the Leninsky district, Kazan?
No, that's the one I just read. It's the next
Okay.
Vasilevsky.
So this is Vasilivka, the Dnepropetrovsk province in Ukraine. The date, summer 1944, during the daytime. 8-year-old V.I. Naharov was standing outside when he suddenly looked up and was paralyzed with fear when he saw an object low in the clouds not too far from the ground. A door was opened on the object and a beautiful woman was standing in the doorway. She had flowing hair and was dressed in a grayish suit and was looking directly at the witness. The alien woman had a severe and determined, strong-willed face. They looked at each other for an indefinite period of time, since the witness appears to have lost all sense of time. He could only remember that he could not stop looking at her, as if he were hypnotized. Moments later, the door closed and the object disappeared. And the source is from UFO DOS, Yaroslav Sochka, Ukraine.
Yeah, that UFOs is a group in the Ukraine that they have collected hundreds of reports.
And I will say from experience, since my father's family comes from Ukraine, that they don't like it when you say the Ukraine. They insist on Ukraine.
Ukraine. So it's interesting because it deals with a female entity or humanoid. All right, here we go. Let's move on. This is from the next case. An object on the ground. And this is near Toulon-on-Arroux in France. Also summer 1944. The time was afternoon. A 13-year-old girl, the name is not stated here, had gone by bicycle to a farm located a few kilometers to get some supplies. Food was rationed at the time, and people black marketed with farmers. Anyway, she was traveling on the RD-42, which is a road which bordered a wooded area, in the direction to a hamlet known as Le Verger. A little before arriving there, she briefly stopped to gather some wild berries and followed a dirt track that went into the woods on the right hand side of the road. Thus, she advanced slowly into the woods, seeking the berries, looking for berries. Suddenly, she looked up, and at a turn on the dirt road, a few hundred meters away, she could see something on the ground with figures moving around it. She thought the object could have been the size of a current compact vehicle, like a Volkswagen, of a metallized draped dull color. She does not remember observing any openings in the object, like windows or doors. The beings that stood near the object measured less than 1 meter in height. They were very short and were clad in a sort of brown combination suit. They seemed to ignore the witness and did not look in their direction as she stood frozen on the spot. She could not recall how long the incident lasted, but remembered an oppressive atmosphere, worsened by the stormy weather, and was briefly unable to move. Suddenly, she was able to react and went to pick up her bicycle, which was nearby. After bending down and looking up, the strange craft and beings had already vanished. There was only a very violent wind which agitated the trees. She did not think to look up into the air, so she didn't look up. And this is from Jenny Randalls, British researcher, in her book Abduction, citing a letter on the French magazine LDNL, Luminaires de la Nuit, or Lights of the Night case. And this again happened in 1944, in the middle of the war. And I saw somebody put a question up there: if humanoid encounters still occur today. They do, maybe less frequent, but they do. I'm working on my last volume, which is covers the year 2016 through 2021, and there's hundreds of reports there already. Already got about 200 and something pages, but they still occur. I mean, maybe they're sometimes they're different. We're concentrating more on abductions and the grays, but yeah, it's still occurring nowadays.
So this case comes to us from Christchurch, New Zealand.
Yes.
The date is late August 1944, the time 1620 hours. While walking among low hills, Mrs. E.M. Church encountered an upturned saucer sitting on a gentle slope hidden from the road. She walked up to it and stared for between 8 and 10 minutes. Small, not over 4 feet, occupants were inside transparent cases. One of the three outside was just a green-colored entity in a transparent box-like casing just standing there. Neither head, arms, nor legs were discerned. The sketch shows merely an irregular column. A cloud came down and enveloped them. She walked closer to within 20 feet. When the one outside noticed her, his helmet flapped over automatically and he drifted into the vehicle, and the door was closed. The object itself, between 18 to 20 feet across and 9 feet high, seemed to be covered with vertically laid tiles resembling wood veneer and with a central circle of aluminum-like material. From the center rose something like a piece of 4-inch pipe as long as your arm. Capped with aluminum, midway on this mast was a blue light. A whirring noise commenced, and the object slowly rose vertically into the clouds. I felt a deep sense of loss.
There's the image of the object there. It was. I don't know if you can display the image.
Yeah.
And this is interesting. This is from New Zealand researchers. Interesting case because it describes the entities or the humanoids as green colored. I mean, their shape was really hard to discern, if you can see in the image. But
literally little green men.
Yeah, they're really out there. Okay, now we got another interesting case dealing with a possibly little green man from Poland. There's the image of the entity. This is from a place called Delasis in Kielce County, Poland. Late fall 1944. Still, World War II was raging. Around the time was 2200, 10 p.m. The young witness woke up around 10 p.m. having a physiological need. It was a cold night. He left the front hallway and stood outside beside the ladder, leaning against the roof of the house, looking around at the cloudy sky. At one point, he noticed a light coming from the right side of the ladder. He turned his head in that direction and was surprised to see a strange sight. Frozen with fear, he watched standing on one of the steps, one of the rungs of the ladder, about 30 centimeters above the witness' head, a small figure about 25 to 30 centimeters tall. The being looked at the witness and smiled. He said heartily. According to the young witness, the being's eyes and face expressed kindness and sympathy. It was dressed in a plain coverall, which emitted a pale green-blue phosphorescent. The witness stood petrified, unable to take his eyes off the being. But when the figure made a movement with his hand, the witness jumped back as if burned, ran home, and hid under the quilt.
I probably would too.
And this is from Polish researcher Boguslaw Kwiatkowski. He wrote something called Touching the Unknown and The Shining Man, I guess that's the entity, in a Polish UFO magazine called The Unknown World, number 9, 1995. Very interesting account, again from World War II. I guess it was a friendly entity.
And we continue with the strange reports. This location is from Barrio Lavadores in Vigo, Spain. Date 1945. The time in the morning. Young Julio F. had gone out to fetch some water from a nearby public water fountain and had gone inside the covered toilets area when he was astounded to see two strangely dressed figures that appeared to be talking amongst themselves. One of the figures, the one closer to the witness, seemed to be pointing at something with his left hand. He was described as having long black hair and beard and wearing a white tunic-like garment. The other figure was completely bald-headed and had large staring eyes. He also wore a tunic like a garment. Both had large slanted eyes. As Julio stared at the figures, he overheard one of them say, "Don't worry, it's just a child." Seconds later, they both vanished in plain sight in front of the witness. Frightened, the witness ran back home without obtaining the necessary water. And this comes from Carlos Fernandez, Gaceta OVNI.
Yeah, Gaceta OVNI used to be a website from Spain. It's no longer active, but it's kind of weird, a weird place to encounter humanoids. And these humanoids were strange. There's an image there. I don't know if you saw the image.
Well, it's a good thing that you've collected these encounters from when the websites are no longer with us.
A lot of the websites that I went into there, I have gathered a lot of information from a lot of websites that one day they're operative, that 2 days later they're gone.
And I also wanted to mention to our audience to please remember to stay around until the end of the show to enter the giveaway for a chance to win Albert's books, Humanoid Encounters, The Others Among Us, from 1930 to 1949. You must be present in the chat to win.
All right, so we move on. Same year, 1945. We're going back to Russia, the Caucasus area. a place called Orchonikitsi. 1945, the time is unknown. Local resident, Georgi Mukachov. I guess he was outside his home. He suddenly encountered three strange entities outside his home. Like I said, all three of them were dwarf-like, reminds me of the French case. About 120 to 130 centimeters in height, and moved extremely fast, using rapid motions. Their demeanor was described as peaceful. These humanoids were dressed in tight-fitting suits with belts, gloves, and boots, which appeared to be part of the suit. Their heads were totally covered by round helmets, and huge oval-shaped, tight-fitting dark goggles covered their faces. They had small protrusions on top of the helmets. They had very wide shoulders, as if they had small covered wings on their backs. Something covered. He thought it was wings. In the place of the mouth on their helmet, they had a long slit-like opening. They also had some kind of straps that joined the coveralls to the elbows, ankles, and wrists, and the neck area. The witness was stunned as the humanoids seemed to disappear and appear in and out at any given moment. The humanoids eventually vanished and did not return. This is directly from Ukrainian researcher Anton Anfolov, citing the Komsomolskaya Pravda newspaper.
Wow, nice pronunciation, Albert. I couldn't have even tried.
I have been in contact with many Russian researchers and Ukrainian researchers also. And Anfolov, he sent me thanks to him, he translated a lot of the cases. He sent it to me. At the beginning, when I didn't have translating tools, now I do. But interesting case. Against the entities were described as dwarfs, not exactly grays, but dwarf. We haven't run into any entity described as a gray yet.
And Mr. MH in the chat says, isn't it strange how they just phase in and out of reality? Really lends credence to the interdimensional theory.
Definitely, yeah. They were, according to the witness, they were in and out. They were disappear and come back.
I would have to agree with that.
Yeah.
So this next case is a location near Lago Colico, Araucania region of Chile, 1946, time early morning. The witness, 14-year-old Euladio,
yeah,
lived near the lake, and one morning he borrowed a friend's boat, like he usually did, and went out fishing. Euladio was poorly educated and couldn't read. Fishing was how he had made his living. This morning, there was a thick fog at the center of the lake. Those fogs, very strange.
Yeah.
Once he penetrated the fog with his boat, to his surprise, he found himself staring at a modern-looking waterway and a beautiful city on its coast with buildings resembling palaces. He approached the shore, and there he was greeted by a man wearing an ancient-style garb who, in a strange Spanish accent, told him that he should immediately leave the area. Suddenly, a very tall blonde woman arrived and intervened and invited Euladio to a palace located near the shore. There he was fed and invited to spend the night. In fairy lore, you're supposed to turn down all food and get the hell out of there.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Yeah, exactly.
According to Euladio, the dining table was equipped with luxurious golden utensils, and obeying an ancestral urge, Euladio placed one of the spoons in his pocket. The next morning he was woken up, and in a gruff manner, some very tall blonde men, and elegantly dressed, took him back to the waterway dock and then ordered him to leave, which he did. He paddled toward the center of the lake and penetrated again the fog bank which was still present. Soon he found himself in more familiar surroundings across the shore from where he lived. He was met by the irate owner of the boat, who asked him why he had taken the boat for 3 days without telling him. To Eliadio, he had only spent 1 night away from shore. Later, he traveled to Temuco, where a local jeweler told him that the spoon was made from solid gold, but only paid him a small amount for it. However, with that same money, Eliadio was able to buy an old boat. He would go out fishing daily, always hoping to locate the beautiful city which he had seen before. 2 years later, Euladio left in his boat and was never seen again. And this source is from Hermogenes Perez de Arce, Conifícico que quiero en los ovnis testimonios, Kindle edition.
Yeah, he's a Chilean researcher. Hermogenes Perez de Arce, confieso que creo en los ovnis. Testimonios. If you translate that to, I confess that I believe in the UFOs. Testimonies. So this is weird. Again, like you said, a fog-like mist or whatever was encountered, and somehow the witness, Euladio, was transported into another realm or reality. I think it was a parallel dimension he stumbled into. He was let go, but then he found that place again.
He must have found it again, yeah. Mr. MH in the chat says, I'm reminded, with the mention of these small humanoids, of the Rosales case of 1954, I think, which stole the woman's stockings and flowers, were chatting amongst themselves alongside their ship. Perhaps it's a fog, not a fog, but a distortion of time and space, which looks like a fog for those who don't understand what they're seeing. And this kind of fog, Albert, turns up in many, many cases.
Many possibly the stories that we read in 411 cases.
Missing 411. Mm-hmm.
Has to do with that. People enter some kind of time dilation or some kind of rift, and most of them are never seen again.
According to Dave Paulides, you don't want to be the first in line or the last in line. In many cases, involve someone that had someone following right behind them and turned around and looked at them, and then within a second or two turned around again and they were gone, and there was no way for them to get out, to go anywhere. They would have seen them. And of course, also in these missing 411 cases, many times search and rescue teams have gone over the area where the person that was missing is eventually found several times, sometimes dozens of times, and then suddenly the people are there, either living or dead, and they've searched this location over and over and over.
They have been through it before, and then somehow that's where the person appears all of a sudden.
Yeah. Strange.
All right, we go now to next case, which deals with another possible abduction. Strange case, not too well known. This is from an area west of Flagstaff, Arizona.
And this is all still before the modern UFO era.
1946, January 1946, around midnight. Excuse me. The witness, Mr. Mike Pizzula, 20 years old, of the Coast Guard. He was a Coast Guard member. Was driving with a friend, Fred Cooper, through a mountains west of Flagstaff. It was cold. The road was very slippery, and there was a fog again that his headlights could penetrate for only 3 yards. So a very heavy fog. Nevertheless, he found he was driving very fast. From then until 10 the next morning, he can't remember anything. At that time, he found himself apparently hanging in the air 1,000 feet above and 1,000 feet behind the car, watching himself drive it. Somehow, he somehow came back into the car, back into his body, and nothing further of an unusual nature occurred. Later, under hypnosis 32 years later, he remembered that the car had stopped in front of a Mexican hat. There's an object which was shaped like a Mexican hat that covered the whole road. Under the hat were two mechanical eyes looking like diamonds. I don't know if they were part of an entity. Then, okay, here we go. Then three beings emerged and glided towards the car. Their bodies leaned forward at a 45-degree angle. They did not seem to have any feet. Around their heads was a radiant glow on their head. The next thing he remembered was the car being put back on the highway and himself being put down the next morning.
Weird.
Apparently, he was somehow his body was taken out of, I don't know.
Sounds almost like astral travel.
Yeah, maybe he was astrally trapped. I mean, abducted. His ethereal body was taken out, and he could. I heard of this before many times. They could see their body, but they're out somewhere else. This is by sources James Harder and Dewey Bosca. Okay, that's the image for the next case. Look like Grace to me. Yeah?
Yeah, I just wanted to give people a chance to look at this before we read it. These definitely look like grays to me.
Yeah.
So the location is La Mina El Yunque in Puerto Rico. The date is 1947. Time in the afternoon. 13-year-old Ladadino Ortiz was exploring the area, and while there heard strange murmuring noises coming from the woods. Wondering who it was, he hid. Suddenly, from a trail on the side of the woods, three strange little men walked out. The little men were carrying a strange, transparent object shaped like a coffin. The coffin-like object appeared to have been made out of crystal, but with a silvery sheen like that of translucent metal. Ortiz further described the little men about 3.5 to 4 feet tall with very pale skin. They had thin, frail-looking bodies and long arms, much longer than humans. Their hands were also long with long fingers. They had large bald heads, somewhat elongated toward the back, and large black eyes. However, he was not able to clearly see their facial features as he only saw them in profile. He does not remember seeing any ears. All three were wearing tight-fitting metallic silvery suits similar to aluminum that covered them from the neck down to their feet. It was obvious that the little men weren't making the strange murmuring sound, which sounded to Ortiz like a record being played at a high speed. Still carrying the strange translucent object, the little men disappeared into the woods on the other side of the trail. Afraid, Ortiz quickly left the area. And the source is Jorge Martin Miranda, location 20 miles south of Malta, Mediterranean Sea.
That's the next case, but Jorge.
Oh, this is in Puerto Rico. Yeah.
Yeah, Jorge. This is El Yunque, which is an area that's been a lot of incidents there. It's like a window, what they call a window area, El Yunque. And Jorge Martin Miranda is a Puerto Rican researcher that's been around for a while, and he has documented hundreds of cases from the island.
And I also want to point out that at this time, anyone that wants to enter the giveaway can do so at the URL on the screen, https bit.ly/3IPWYCZ. And you can use this link to win Albert's book, Humanoid Encounters: The Others Among Us, 1930 to 1949. Remember that you must stay until the end of the stream when we spin the wheel in order to win.
All right. So after this interesting Puerto Rican case, we move on. This is summer 1947. The modern era already started. This is a 20 miles south of the island of Malta in the Mediterranean Sea. Summer, like I said, summer 1947, time is unknown. Anglers, which are fishermen, were raising their nets with a catch of fish when they saw an object floating on the water's surface that looked like a black submarine. To them, it looked like a submarine. The men were frightened at the object's appearance, saying that it looked like a monster. They quickly started the boat's engine. Suddenly, a bright light from the submarine lit up the whole area, and several little men began running over the deck of the object, or the so-called submarine. The men could make out that the little entities, the little men, carry some sort of, they were carrying some sort of apparatus around their waist. They were about the size of a 10-year-old boy. And after a few minutes, the little men entered the submarine, which began to glow so brightly that the anglers or fishermen could not see anymore. It then apparently submerged and disappeared. This is from Maltese researcher David Pace, UFOs over the Maltese island. And this is obviously what we call a USO, unidentified submerged object.
Submerged object, yeah. And Albert, what variety of sighting would this be?
Well, the little men were seen entering the object, so it would be like a type B close encounter. I mean, the object was in the water, but still was a humanoid encounter. The entities were seen directly going back inside the object, so that's a type B, which is when entities are seen coming out of the object, in and out, through an opening or hatch.
Okay, so this is location Pavlovsk in the Leningrad region of Russia. The date is 1948, the time unknown. So we are into the modern era of UFOs now.
Yes.
V. Bondarenko, at the time a young boy, later to become a geophysicist and candidate of technical sciences, was exploring the caves near his home in hope of finding old discarded World War II weapons, probably left behind by the retreating Germans. Sticking his head inside an opening which connected two parallel tunnels of a cave, the boy saw a strange figure. The figure was humanoid in appearance, dressed in a loose-fitting cloak that hung down to the ground. This humanoid entity was emitting a bright light, but the main source of light was not the figure, but from a staff with a sphere at the tip, which the figure carried. The sphere emanated a softer yellow light, while the humanoid figure itself emitted a bluish light. It was impossible for the boy to determine the sex of the glowing figure. While the boy finally snapped out of his stunned state, he attempted to push his body back to the surface, trying not to make any sound, but his legs had become numb, almost paralyzed, and all he could do was hold his breath, trying not to expose himself and tremble with fear. The terrified boy waited several minutes before he finally succeeded in getting out of the cave and running home. Apparently, this meeting with the strange entity had predetermined Bondarenko's further interest in anomalous phenomena. On several other occasions, Bondarenko observed other mysterious underground phenomena in the Crimea and the Urals. Mostly mysterious, fast-moving columns of light. He attempted to photograph the lights, but was unsuccessful. And the source is Yuri P. Serpienko and Irania A. Shiliansaka, Mysterious Places on the Map of Russia, Moscow, 2007.
Yeah, these are publications that whoever sent me the case, they cite the publication. But obviously, I don't have the original Russian publication. But this is an interesting case of what appeared to have been an underground humanoid. And this humanoid was carrying a staff, glowing staff, shiny sphere, which is reported in many instances. And when humanoids are encountered, they carry some kind of staff or some kind of stick or rod, perhaps used as protection, or who knows. But it's not the first time that they have humanoids carrying some type of.
Mr. MH in the chat mentions there's lots of Russian cases, and that's awesome. It's a place where you don't hear about many cases generally.
If you look into the my book from 1980s, 89, 1990, there were hundreds of cases from the back then it was still USSR, but it crumbled. But it started in Ukraine, then Russia, the Borosnev landings in September '89, where several incidents there, and it was an amazing amount of cases that lasted from '89 through late '90s in Russia.
A lot of those cases, I think, are attributed to the researcher Paul Stonehill. Is that right?
Yeah, Stonehill investigated a lot of these cases. Yeah, he's another source that I have corresponded with. I think he lives in the States, Stonehill, but there's a lot of other Russian researchers that have more information, but unfortunately, their work hasn't been translated or made public here in the West. I obtain a lot of these cases because I go into their websites or into their. Sometimes they place their books online, the whole book. A lot of these researchers, and I translate I try to translate them exactly, but sometimes it doesn't work.
Okay, I'm gonna let you try to pronounce this next one, Albert.
Okay, here we go. The next one, 1948. The time is 10 a.m. The location is Cerro Grande in Tegucigalpa in Honduras, Central America. Again, you don't hear too many cases from there, but I have sources and connections. The witness, Mr. Gaspar, I see what you mean, Eguiguren, was, after translating so many languages, I become an expert. Okay?
Yeah.
I'm not pronouncing stuff. Was exploring the hills surrounding the Honduran capital and was walking by a ravine enjoying the view of the city. He paused to take in the view, and when he looked behind him, he saw two strange figures sitting on top of a large boulder nearby. The two figures seemed to be making bizarre, strange signals towards the sky and looking up at the same time. I guess they were signaling somebody. They have very long, thin arms and four-finger hands. Afraid, Gaspar stepped back, causing a small avalanche of rocks that rolled down the ravine. This alerted the strangers to his presence, and they both turned around to look at him. Gaspar described their faces as long, they had large slanted eyes that were both short and they were both short in stature and appear to be twins, since they look exactly alike, these two entities. The creatures appeared startled upon seeing Gaspard and jumped from the boulder, and in seconds they were on the summit of the hill. Gaspard then heard a loud noise like a tornado, and the figures disappeared. Very nervous, Gaspard remained there and was soon joined by two other men who were also trekking up the hill. He told them what he had seen, and one of them told Gaspar that he had seen a strange cloud over the hill, and then a brilliant yellow light flew into the clouds. Other residents in the area had reported seeing balls of fire flying over the hill. So this is from Honduran researcher Jorge Montenegro in his book Extraterrestres, Los OVNIs en Honduras, page 279 to 281. He wrote a small book with a lot of interesting incidents from Honduras, a place that you don't hear too many cases coming from. Which I was able to translate. I had the book, but I had to return it.
Mm.
Excellent book. Pretty weird. Okay, your turn now.
Okay, so this location is Gory Soe near Beulah, Poland. The date is 1949 or 1950. Time, evening. A 22-year-old man walking on a path in a mountainous region noticed a strange small entity wearing a grayish outfit standing on the path about 100 meters ahead. He did not see its face, which was hidden under a hood. The figure was the size of a child but moved around like an adult. After a while, 4 similar entities appeared. They looked identical to the first one. They stood around as if waiting for somebody. The man then heard a sound resembling the twittering of birds. After a while, 3 of the figures walked into the forest on the opposite side of the path. The 2 remaining entities seemed to gesture between them and then followed the same direction. The witness additionally described the entities as about 1.2 meters in height, wearing close-fitting gray overalls with pointed hoods. According to the witness, quote, "During the encounter, I felt completely isolated from the environment, as if somebody had sucked me into another world. When the creatures disappeared back into the forest, he felt indescribable relief." And this source is quoting Yorsa Krasnowski and Damian Trela.
Yeah, Damian Trela, he wrote a book about close encounters in Poland. And this is a very interesting case. He mentioned, the witness mentions that he felt like he was like in another world during the encounter. So maybe he was in another world. God knows. He felt like he was completely isolated. And Eric Miaska, which is another Polish researcher, he wrote a book called Magic Reality in Polish. Too bad it's not available in English yet. And he mentions a lot of cases, similar cases like that.
And quickly, I wanted to point out again that you can get your Into the Fringe t-shirts at the URL on the screen, https://store.creator-spring.com/apparel. Check them out. They're pretty cool.
Okay, here we move on to a next case, which appears to be an abduction in Sweden. Again, Sweden, near Piteå, Sweden, a city there north in Sweden. The date is March 1949, around 4 a.m. The witness was 19-year-old Sven Persons. He had left work early in the morning and was cycling home from Lovholmens to Piteå. As he approached the Ojebens church, he saw what he described as 2 ships come down from the sky to his left and hover about 20 meters away and very close to the ground. The objects or ships resembled 2 deep bowls with numerous lights on the bottom. Soon a gap or opening became visible on one of the objects, and 2 men wearing diver suit and helmets and carrying what appeared to be hoses came out. Very curious, Sven stopped and thought that the men were going to perform some underwater work. He had never heard of flying saucers and had no idea what he was watching. However, the men suddenly approached Sven, and he was suddenly unable to move. At this point, he perceived a telepathic message from one of the creatures, one of the men, telling him not to be afraid, and was also asked how old he was. Apparently, the creatures did not understand him when he said he was 19 years of age. I don't know why he couldn't understand. Sven attempted to explain by counting on his fingers, but the creature somehow arrived at the figure of 100. I guess it couldn't. Their time frame was different from us. Though. Weird. Before the creature started to question Sven, they told him that they had been traveling for a long time, and added that they had not begun the journey that they had not begun the journey that it had been begun by generations before them. Like the others before him had started the journey. They then asked Ben if he wanted to go with them. He said yes, but only if he could come back home. They told him that it was impossible for him to come, since he will have been long forgotten. But in their world, he will have lived much longer than humans on Earth, and will become famous. I guess their time frame was totally different from us. Just similar to the fairy incident when you
I
go
was just thinking that.
and hundreds of years have passed. For you, you think you're only 2 or 3 days.
Like Rip Van Winkle.
Yeah. Sven then placed his bicycle on the side of the road and was taken on board one of the craft. Inside, he found himself in a small antechamber, and then a door opened on the wall, and he could see another room where he saw two other men wearing tight-fitting diving suits. Now he was able to see that the faces of the aliens, which were similar to humans, but expressionless and almost mask-like in nature. He felt that they did not want to reveal their true features, so not to frighten him. While in this room, Span was not able to move and felt somehow controlled by the aliens. He was able to see a sort of control panel, 70 by 70 centimeters in diameter, where he saw a picture of the universe. Cool. I guess stars and planets, who knows. He also saw numerous other devices which apparently controlled the ship. According to Sven, he was told by the aliens that their point of origin, but claims he was unable to remember it today. So I guess he was interviewed years later. Moments after being shown the control panel, another entity entered the room and walked towards Sven. The other two aliens apparently tried to prevent the creature from entering the room, apparently in an effort to prevent Sven from becoming frightened. She, Sven now understood that this creature was a female, resembled nothing that he ever seen before. The strange creature had a large pig-like snout, and on the back of his neck, he had a sort of a mane that stood straight up and became shorter further down his back. The skin was pink color and had a large slanted blue eyes. He was then told that he should have feelings for her, but Sven was unable to, since she was not a pleasant sight to look at, unlike the other two aliens. Unlike the other two aliens, a female entity wanted Sven to accompany them back to their planet and stay with them. This apparently caused a conflict between the other two aliens and the bizarre female entity. Just then, orders came from the other ship that they were ready to go. But the three aliens continued to argue. However, soon there were sharper orders issued, and before he knew it, Sven was standing by his bicycle on the ground. Sven watched as both craft flew over the church and disappeared in a northwest direction at high speed. Confused about the experience, he then cycled home. He felt uneasy at home after arriving. He was sure that somehow there was some memory that had been suppressed by the alien. He was convinced that at some point his clothes had been removed and he had been examined. He felt dirty inside. Kind of weird. Maybe, God knows, he had a missing time on board the object, and God knows what that other creature was. Maybe, And the
That's
other,
a weird one, Albert.
they were in conflict. They wanted to, one of the aliens wanted to keep him there, the other two no. But I guess a higher hierarchy said no. Let's leave him. Who knows? Maybe if they would have kept him, we would never see him again. Another missing person.
Well, at this point, I'm going to bring in my moderator, Antiderivative Jill. Hello, Jill.
Hello, Cardinalson and Albert.
Right.
It looks like
How are you?
tonight. Oh, I'm doing pretty well. How are you?
Pretty good. Reading some very strange cases.
Yeah, sounds like it. It looks
How are
like
we on the giveaway wheel?
tonight we have 3 participants on our wheel tonight. Are you ready to spin?
I think we can wait for a few more people if they want to try to enter. We have
Okay.
7 or 8 people in the chat. Let me make you big there. So that's the book. You want to hold it up a little bit more to the light? And that's a 400-some page book, right?
Yes. Humanoid
Awesome.
Encounters, 1930 to 1949.
1949.
Yeah.
So after this, next month we'll be solidly into the modern UFO era.
Yeah, 1949 on.
Mr. MH says, LOL, unlike Antonio Villas-Boas,
Right, the enemy
and
and human-like.
no, Darius, moderators are not disqualified. You may enter your name, and Jill, you may enter your name. Just because you're spinning the wheel doesn't mean that you shouldn't have a chance to win the book. So let's make sure everyone who wants to gets a chance by putting their name into the link, which is on the screen now. We have a few minutes here before we give it a spin. So please, everyone that is interested in winning the book, go to the link on the screen and just enter your name, and it will appear on the wheel as if by magic.
Yes, magic performed by me.
That's right.
I've added Darius to the wheel.
Did you add
Yeah.
yourself?
I'm not. No, but I did get Mr. MH's details.
Okay. Well, feel free to add yourself. It's not hinky, it's totally random.
All right, sure, why not?
Make it a little more interesting. And Albert, while we're waiting for people to get their names in, I just wanted to say thank you for another wonderful show. These encounters are really mind-blowing. And
Yeah, some of them are really
like I
hard to
said,
Yeah.
when I was watching or reading rather the database that was online before your publisher made you take it down, I literally spent days fascinated reading the cases. It was just incredible, and there's so many. You could read for weeks and still not even really touch. I mean, you have what, 20,000 now?
I got over 20,000.
Over 20,000.
I think it's closer to 25,000 now. Yeah. And that's taken a long time to do, and a lot of time and a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. Like church.
You may end up doing 2021 to 2025.
No, I'm stopping at 2021. I am. What's I was going to say? Yeah, I'm. Some of these cases, you think, you go, why would anybody make up something like that? So bizarre. I mean, it sounds so bizarre that they got to be true. You know what I mean? I mean, because Nowadays, when I have somebody that contacts me and says, "Yeah, the Greys kidnapped me," I'm more skeptical, about that than some other cases. And they call me they're really weird. I mean, I'm not saying that the Greys are not real, but I will be more skeptical because that's what everybody hears nowadays. The Greys on TV, the Hollywood Greys. But yeah, I like to go into different types of encounters.
Definitely. And Jill, did we get Cam onto the wheel?
Let me see. Cam has not entered information yet.
Okay, Cam, if you want to be eligible to win the book in the giveaway, please go to the URL on the screen and enter your name so it will appear on the wheel. In the meantime, Mr. MH has said at Cardinal Sin, just wanted to say it's an honor and a privilege to hear Albert Rosales talk about the humanoid phenomenon, a field that he has put so much work into. Thank you, Albert, for your time, sir.
You're welcome. Thank you. I heard a noise and I thought it was a humanoid coming up behind me.
Somebody pulled it was Tracy Torme last week on Into the Fringe. Pulled a little scary thing on me. Said, I think I see a gray coming up behind you, Gil.
Gray.
And Don McDouglas says, yeah, thanks a lot. Very interesting.
Thank you.
So, Jill, have we gotten any more entrants?
No, we have not. We don't have any more entrants. We have 5 so far.
Okay. Well, let's go ahead and bring that wheel in.
Okay. Let's see how it appears to you.
That looks pretty
right.
good.
Are you ready?
We'll go ahead and give it a spin. Congratulations, Don McDouglas.
Yeah, you got the book.
So, Don, if you will send your information to me via email. My email address is gil@sunflower.com. If you'll send me your mailing address, then we will get the book out to you. Very welcome, sir. Congratulations. And Jill, thank you very much for your assistance. You've done a great job modding once again.
You're welcome. It's been a pleasure.
And so we will say goodbye to Jill. Bye, Jill.
Bye.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Talk to you later.
All right. So again, thanks very much, Albert, for another fascinating episode of Into the Fringe with the humanoid encounters.
You're welcome.
And we will
My
catch
pleasure.
you next month. And then we will be covering 1950 to 1955, correct?
Yeah. Just about 1955, yeah.
1954, yeah, something like that. And Mr. MH says, that was great. Thank you once again, Cardinal Sin and Albert, for your time. That was great as always. And congrats to Don McDouglas. So for Albert Rosales, it's cardinal sin.